I carried the peach cake my late husband loved most into my son's Christmas dinner, hoping for nothing more than a peaceful evening with my family. My daughter-in-law smiled, placed 2 slices of dry bread in front of me and said, "You're old now, that's more than enough for you." My son lowered his eyes and quietly kept cutting his Wagyu steak as if nothing had happened. I calmly set my purse on the table, and suddenly no one in that room had any appetite left. This story begins at a Christmas table, but it won't end the way you think. Before we continue, leave a quick comment for me. What's the weather like where you are right now? Your perspective matters more than you know. A quick note, some details in this story have been adjusted for reflection and storytelling. The lesson it carries is what truly matters. At 75, I had learned that the most important decisions are made in the dark before anyone else is awake to tell you what they cost. The kitchen clock read 4:13 when I measured the butter. Yellow light from the pendant lamp above my counter was the only awake light in the building. Outside my apartment window, Pacific Grove still slept under December fog. I had built 11 coastal hotels from nothing and buried the only man who ever truly knew me, and now I was awake on Christmas Eve making the cake Walter loved most. The butter had to be room temperature, the peaches had to be fresh, not canned, the cinnamon went in after the vanilla, never before. I had perfected this recipe over 35 years of marriage trial and error, and Walter's patient smile every time I got it almost right. I believe in 3 things he used to say: kindness, carefully signed contracts, and a good breakfast. I creamed the butter and sugar until my wooden spoon scraped against the bowl in a rhythm I could have kept in my sleep. The smell of cinnamon filled the small kitchen. It filled the corners where Walter's coffee mug used to sit, the space beside the sink where he would stand and dry dishes while I washed, talking about nothing and everything. The phone call had come last week. Celeste's voice bright and insistent. "You absolutely must come, Mom. We're hosting Christmas Eve for the whole family." I folded the peaches into the batter with careful strokes. Too rough and they would break apart. Too gentle and they would sink to the bottom. Walter had taught me that. His mother never got it right, though. I would never have said so when she was alive. The cake went into the oven at 4:47, 350 degrees exactly 42 minutes. I set the timer and washed my hands, and then I opened the drawer beside the refrigerator where I kept the things that mattered. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, expensive. Graves Whitmore and Associates printed in raised letters across the top left corner. Inside were documents I had signed 3 days ago, December 21st, in Helena Graves's corner office overlooking Monterey Bay. Every page notarized, every clause exact. I had been carrying this envelope for 3 days. I had planned to wait until after Christmas. I held it in both hands. The paper was heavy, the kind that doesn't bend easily. Then I placed it in my purse, closed the drawer, and checked the timer. 31 minutes left. The cake came out perfect. Golden brown, the peaches visible through the top crust in small amber circles, better than his mother's ever was. I let it cool on the wire rack while I showered and dressed, and by the time I wrapped it in the white bakery box I kept for occasions like this, the morning fog had started to lift. The drive from Pacific Grove to Carmel took 43 minutes. I had 43 minutes to decide whether tonight would be the night I stopped pretending. Scenic Road curved along the coastline like a postcard. The mansion sat behind iron gates and 50-year-old cypress trees, $6.8 million of glass and white stone facing the Pacific. A 20-foot Christmas tree stood in the front window, lit with what must have been 1,000 white lights. Through the glass, I could see people moving, hear the faint sound of a jazz quartet playing something seasonal and expensive. I parked in the circular drive behind a Tesla and a Mercedes. The cake box sat on the passenger seat beside my purse. I could feel the weight of the envelope inside pressing against the leather. Celeste. My daughter-in-law of 15 years opened the door in a champagne silk dress and took my cake box with 2 fingers the way one receives a wet umbrella. "Mom, you didn't need to bring anything," she said, her smile wide and white. "We already have dessert." She handed the box to a woman in a black uniform I had never seen before. "Don't bring this out," she murmured, and the woman disappeared toward the kitchen. Inside, the house smelled like pine and money. The jazz quartet sat in the corner of the living room playing for 12 guests I didn't recognize. A young man in a white jacket stood behind a bar cart, pouring champagne into crystal flutes. Celeste touched my elbow and guided me toward the dining room. "We're doing a more intimate dinner this year," she said. "Just family." The table was set for 12. White linen silver candlesticks calligraphed name cards in small gold frames. At each place setting sat a plate of what I recognized as A5 Wagyu beef, perfectly seared, beside roasted vegetables arranged like art. Crystal wine glasses caught the candlelight. Silver knives rested at precise angles. 11 of these place settings. At the foot of the table where the 12th chair sat, there was a plate so small it could have been a child's. On it, 2 slices of bread. Dry, no butter, no water glass, no name card. I stood there looking at it. The jazz quartet finished one song and started another. Someone laughed in the living room. The man at the bar cart shook a cocktail shaker in 3/4 time. Celeste appeared at my shoulder. "We thought you'd prefer something lighter, Mom." Her voice carried across the dining room, meant for the guests now filing in. Older people eating less in the evening is better for their health. Stanley Caldwell, a retired Superior Court judge who had spent 30 years on the bench, sat beside his daughter with a wine glass he hadn't yet touched. Lorelei Celeste's mother wore pearls that matched her daughter's and smiled politely at nothing in particular. The other guests found their name cards, pulled out chairs, unfolded linen napkins. My son Desmond, 48 and CEO of the company I had built, sat at the head of the table without meeting my eyes. He picked up his silver knife. He cut his Wagyu into small, precise pieces. He did not look up. I looked at the plate of bread. I looked at my son. He did not look back. And I understood not just tonight, but for a long time now that he knew. He had known exactly what his wife was planning, and he had sat down at this table anyway. I did not sit down. Desmond set his knife on the edge of his plate with a soft clink. Celeste's smile widened. The guests who had been watching me now looked at their Wagyu, their wine glasses, the candlelight reflecting off silver. Anywhere but at the woman standing at the foot of the table with a plate of dry bread. But I was not thinking about the bread anymore. I was thinking about 3 days ago. December 21st. I had driven to the mansion to pick up a gift box I had left in the guest room the week before. I rang the bell twice. No answer. The front door was unlocked. It usually was during the day, so I let myself in. I heard voices from the kitchen. Celeste's voice bright and certain. "Your mother only needs bread," she said. "Older people eating less is best." I stood in the hallway. I could see the edge of the marble counter, the silver fixtures, the window over the sink where the winter light came through. My son's voice came next, one word. "Yeah." Not a question, not a protest, not even a pause. Agreement. I stood there for 10 seconds. Then I walked out. The front door, climbed into my car, drove the 43 minutes back to Pacific Grove, and sat at my kitchen table with my phone in my hand. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number Helena Graves had given me 2 years ago when she closed the sale of my 11th hotel. "Call me if you ever need anything," she had said. "Anything at all." I called. Now standing at this table with 12 guests pretending not to stare, I watched Celeste lean toward her mother and whisper something behind her hand. Lorelei nodded. Stanley cut his beef into smaller pieces and did not look up. Celeste raised her voice just enough to carry. "Mom has always been so particular about eating light," she said, smiling at her parents. "Haven't you?" I said nothing. There is a particular kind of person in the world who always has an explanation ready before you have a chance to object. That is the most careful type of person in the world, the one who has already decided what you need, what you want, what is best for you, and has packaged it in words so reasonable that disagreeing makes you seem unreasonable. I had met this type of person before. I had been married to this type of person's daughter for 15 years. 2010. Celeste and Desmond had been married 3 years. I came to visit and found that the set of China Walter's mother had given me 80-year-old Limoges, 12 place settings, cream and gold, had been packed into boxes in the garage. "It doesn't match the new interior style," Celeste said, touching my arm. "You understand." 2015. I took Briar and Finn to the Monterey Aquarium. Briar asked why I didn't come to their house more often. Before I could answer, Celeste appeared beside us. "Grandma doesn't run hotels anymore," she told Briar, her voice gentle, "so she isn't as busy as she used to be." I had sold the last hotel in 2017. I had been plenty busy before that, 2020. Celeste and Desmond came to my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. Desmond sat on the sofa where Walter used to sit and said nothing while his wife explained that they thought it was time they took over some of the bigger decisions. "Now that you're getting older, Mom," Celeste said. I was 72. I had just finished a 6-mile walk along the coast. Every single time the explanation came before I could object. Every single time it was delivered with a smile, a touch on the arm, a voice that said, This is kindness, this is care, this is what you need whether you know it or not. I had listened for 15 years. I had been taught that listening is polite. Tonight, I was about to teach a different lesson. Celeste was telling a story now, something about a friend's mother-in-law who also preferred to eat light. Her parents laughed. Stanley's laugh was polite practice, the kind that comes from 30 years on a bench learning to smooth over uncomfortable moments. Lorelei looked at her plate. The smell of the Wagyu hung in the air, rich and expensive. The candles burned lower in their silver holders. The jazz quartet moved from one carol to another, something slow with a piano lead. I looked at the bread one last time. 2 slices dry, the edges slightly stale. Then I looked at my son. He was cutting his beef into pieces so small a child could have eaten them. He had not looked at me once since I walked into this room. I set my purse on the chair where I was supposed to sit. Not to sit, to make space, to prepare. I opened the clasp. The sound was small but distinct in the space between Celeste's words. She paused. Her eyes flicked toward me, then back to her father. I reached inside and pulled out the cream envelope. Graves Whitmore and Associates in raised lettering across the top left corner. Thick paper, the kind that does not bend. I placed it on the table in front of the bread plate. Celeste saw it. Her smile did not change, but her eyes did. She knew that logo. Every property owner in Monterey County knew Graves Whitmore and Associates. They were the firm you hired when you wanted something done correctly, legally, and permanently. I looked around the table. 12 faces, some still chewing, some frozen mid-bite, some with wine glasses halfway to their mouths. I want everyone to put their knives and forks down for a moment, I said. My voice was calm, quiet. The same voice I had used to close contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. The same voice I had used to fire a district manager who had been stealing from me. The same voice I had used to tell the hospice nurse that, yes, I understood, and yes, I would like to be alone with my husband now. The room fell silent. The jazz quartet kept playing for 3 more seconds before the violinist saw my son's hand signal and they stopped mid-phrase. 12 people sat with forks halfway to mouths or already lowered, staring at the cream envelope on the table. Celeste's smile had not changed, but her knuckles on her wine glass had gone white. Celeste's voice cut through the silence before I could touch the envelope. Mom, this is neither the time nor the place to what? I said. My voice was quiet. I was not shouting. I was not crying. I was using the same tone I had used in 1987 when a contractor told me the foundation work on my 3rd hotel would cost twice the estimate, and I had pulled out the signed contract and read it aloud line by line until he remembered exactly what he had agreed to. Celeste's mouth closed. Her smile stayed exactly where it was, but something behind her eyes shifted. She had expected tears, maybe, or anger, or an apology for making a scene. I gave her none of those things. In 2010, I said, you packed away my china because it didn't match the style. I sat at your kitchen table and listened while you explained that cream and gold Limoges looked dated. I did not interrupt. I did not argue. I drove home with those boxes in my trunk and stored them in a closet where I would not have to see them. I paused. No one at the table moved. The candles burned lower in their silver holders. The smell of Wagyu had faded, replaced by something sharper. The smell of melted wax of expensive wine going warm in crystal glasses. In 2015, I continued, my daughter-in-law told my grandchildren that Grandma doesn't work anymore, that Grandma isn't as busy as she used to be. I had sold my last hotel 2 years prior for $94 million. I was serving on 3 nonprofit boards. I walked 6 miles every morning. But I sat in that aquarium cafeteria and listened while my granddaughter nodded and said, oh, that's why you don't come visit much. I did not correct the record. I smiled. I bought them both ice cream. Stanley Caldwell set his wine glass down very carefully. His hand was steady. 30 years on the bench had taught him how to keep his hands steady, but his eyes were not. In 2020, I said, my daughter-in-law came to my apartment on a Tuesday afternoon and announced that she and my son would be taking over the important decisions now that I was getting older. My husband was still alive. He was in the guest room resting because the hospice nurse had just left. He had 3 weeks to live. But I sat on my own sofa in my own home and listened while my daughter-in-law explained that this was for my own good, that I shouldn't worry, that they would handle everything. I looked at Celeste. She was still smiling. But it was not an expression anymore. It was a thing she was wearing, like the champagne silk dress, like the pearls at her throat. I sat and listened, I said. For 15 years I sat and listened while you explained what I needed, what I wanted, what was best for me. You have had 15 years of my silence. You have had 15 years of my politeness. You have mistaken both for agreement. The room was so quiet I could hear the candles burning. Tonight, I said, I stand, I read. You sit and listen. It is a small, fair, reciprocal arrangement. Celeste opened her mouth. No sound came out. She closed it again. That is the most careful type of person in the world, the one who always explains their behavior before you have a chance to object, so that any resistance sounds like ingratitude, any boundary sounds like cruelty. The one who has spent so long constructing reasonable explanations that when someone finally says no, they have no response prepared. They have never needed one before. I reached for the envelope. Lorelei was looking at her daughter with an expression I could not quite read. Stanley had gone very still. Desmond sat at the head of the table with both hands flat on the white linen, staring at a point somewhere past my left shoulder. The guests, friends of Celeste's colleagues of Desmond's people, I had never met and would likely never see again, sat frozen with forks in hand, wine glasses halfway to lips, cloth napkins clutched in laps. No one was eating anymore. I had been taught that listening is polite, that good mothers-in-law smile and nod, that family harmony matters more than being right, that you should never make a scene, never raise your voice, never do anything that might make other people uncomfortable at a dinner party. Tonight I was about to teach a different lesson. I picked up the envelope. The paper was thick between my fingers, expensive, the kind that law firms use when they want you to know that what is written inside has weight. Legal weight. The kind that holds up in court. Celeste was watching my hands now. Her smile had finally slipped, not gone. She was too well trained for that, but it had moved, shifted, become something tighter at the corners. She knew this logo. She knew what Graves Whitmore and Associates meant. They were not the firm you called for a simple will or a traffic ticket. They were the firm you called when you were buying a company, selling a property, dissolving a partnership. When you needed something done that would last. When you needed something that could not be undone. "Mom," Celeste said. Her voice was different now, smaller. "Please. Let's discuss this privately." "No," I said. One word, quiet, final. The same word my son had said 3 days ago in his kitchen when his wife asked if his mother needed more than bread. I opened the envelope. The paper made a sound in that silent room, a whisper of movement, cream stalk sliding against cream stalk, heavy and deliberate. I unfolded the letter inside. It was 2 pages printed on Graves Whitmore and Associates letterhead, signed at the bottom in Helena's distinctive script. 12 people sat frozen. Forks rested on plates. Wine glasses stood untouched. The candles flickered in their holders, throwing long shadows across the white linen. Celeste's knuckles were white where they gripped the stem of her wine glass. Her smile was gone now. What remained was something harder, sharper, the thing that had always been underneath. Not one of them was eating anymore. I looked down at the first line of the letter and began to read. My voice, when I began to read, sounded nothing like a woman who had just been served dry bread at her own Christmas dinner. It sounded like a woman reading a business contract, which is exactly what I was doing. "Dear Mrs. Constance Whitfield," I read, "this letter confirms the legal actions taken on your behalf this week regarding the property and financial matters you and I discussed on December 21st, 2023. I paused. Let the date settle. 3 days ago. While Celeste was planning her bread plate and selecting the A5 Wagyu, I had been sitting in Helena Graves's office signing documents. First, I continued, the property located at Scenic Road, Carmel by the Sea, currently occupied by your son Desmond Whitfield and his wife Celeste Caldwell. Whitfield is, as of December 21st, 2023, returned to your sole legal ownership pursuant to the automatic reversion clause, contained in the original deed transfer of November 3rd, 2018. Celeste's wine glass stopped halfway to her mouth. I kept reading. Said clause inserted at the express and repeated insistence of your late husband Walter Whitfield established the property transfer as a fee, simple determinable. Under the terms agreed upon and signed by all parties in 2018, if the mortgage balance of $2.1 million was not satisfied within 18 months of Mr. Whitfield's death, full ownership would automatically revert to you as his surviving spouse and original co-owner. The words fee, simple, determinable, hung in the air like smoke. Stanley Caldwell's head came up. His eyes went to his daughter, then to me, then back to the letter in my hands. He knew what those words meant. 30 years on the bench, and he knew exactly what kind of legal mechanism his daughter had just walked into. Your husband passed on December 24th, 2022, I read. Today is December 24th, 2023, exactly 365 days. The mortgage remains unpaid. On December 21st, I filed the necessary documentation with the Monterey County Recorder's Office. The deed has been updated. I looked up from the letter, looked directly at Celeste. "This is my house," I said. Not loud, not angry, just a fact. The same way I might have said the sky is blue or the ocean is salt water. Celeste set her wine glass down. Her hand was steady, but the smile had finally disappeared completely. What was left was something sharper. "You can't," she started. "I already did," I said, 3 days ago, while you were deciding what to serve me for Christmas dinner. I looked back down at the letter. "There's more," I said. I paused my reading for a second, looked up. Stanley Caldwell had set his wine glass down very carefully, as if he suddenly understood exactly what kind of law was being deployed at his daughter's dinner table. Lorelei was staring at her plate. The other guests sat frozen forks, abandoned napkins clutched in laps. The candles had burned down another half-inch. The room smelled like wax and cold beef. Second, I read pursuant to the promissory note signed by Desmond Whitfield on March 14, 2019, the personal loan extended by you in the amount of $2.8 million for the purposes of expanding Whitfield Hospitality Group's boutique hotel portfolio to include properties in Big Sur Carmel and Santa Barbara remains outstanding. I stopped reading, looked at my son. "Do you remember signing this paper?" I asked. Desmond said nothing. His hands were flat on the table on either side of his plate. He was staring at the wagyu he had cut into such small, precise pieces. "I'll take that as a yes," I said. I went back to the letter. The loan was issued with a 24-month repayment term and an interest rate of 3.5% per annum compounding annually. As of December 21, 2023, no payments have been made against either the principal or the accrued interest. I let that sit for a moment. No payments, not one, in 4.5 years. With compound interest calculated from March 2019 to the present date. I continued, the total debt currently stands at $3.24 million. Celeste's eyes moved. Not her head, just her eyes cutting sideways to her husband. Calculating. I kept reading. Pursuant to the terms of the original promissory note and in accordance with California commercial lending law, formal demand for repayment is hereby made. Full payment of $3.24 million is due within 30 days of the date of this letter. I looked up, which means, I said, the deadline is January 23, 2024. 30 days, 1 month from 3 days ago, 27 days from tonight. Desmond's hands moved, just slightly, enough that the knife he was still holding touched the edge of his plate and made a small, sharp sound in the silence. I watched my son's hands begin to tremble. Not a lot. Just enough that the knife he was still holding made a small sound against the plate. Not loud, but in that silent room with 12 people holding their breath, it sounded like breaking glass. He set the knife down, placed both hands in his lap where I could not see them anymore. "Mom," he said. His voice was quiet. "We don't have—" "I know," I said, because I did know. I knew exactly what they had and what they didn't have. I had spent the last 3 days going through every document, every bank statement, every piece of paper Helena's firm could legally access. I knew my son and his wife were living in a $6.8 million house with a $2.1 million mortgage they couldn't pay. I knew they had taken nearly $3 million from me and spent it on hotels that were barely breaking even. I knew their combined annual income, their credit card debt, their car payments, their country club dues. I knew they could not write a check for $3.24 million in 30 days. I knew all of this before I walked into this house tonight with a cake in a white box. Desmond looked down at his hands. They were trembling. Celeste looked at me, and for the first time since I had stood up, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't a smile or a strategy, it was arithmetic. She was calculating whether $3.24 million could be paid in 30 days. I hadn't even read the heaviest item yet. I flipped to the next page. It was not one page. It was several pages stapled together labeled Exhibit A in bold letters at the top. A list. Long. Detailed. The kind accountants make when they are documenting assets for probate or divorce. Third, I read the personal property currently held at this residence, including but not limited to the California Impressionist painting collection, 12 works valued at $4.2 million, according to a 2023 appraisal conducted by Bonham's Auction House. the Patek Philippe vintage watch collection, 6 timepieces, the heirloom silver service for 24, the Wedgwood bone china service for 16, the Steinway Model D grand piano, the wine collection 847 bottles valued at $890,000, and the 1965 Jaguar E-Type stored in the climate-controlled garage. I paused. Let the numbers settle. 4.2 million in paintings, 890,000 in wine. Not the kind of numbers you forget you own. 23 items total, I continued. White Glove Moving and Storage has been contracted to retrieve all listed property on December 27th at 9 a.m., 3 days from now, the day after Christmas, before the New Year. I looked up from the letter, looked at Celeste. Between June and September of this year, I said 3 paintings from this list were used as collateral for a loan at Silvergate Private Bank. The wine collection has decreased by 127 bottles since the last inventory in January. One Patek Philippe watch, the 1948 reference 1526, was sold through Christie's in August. I let that sit. My law firm received notification from the bank in October, I said. Silvergate is required by law to inform the original owner when estate property is used as collateral without proper authorization. Celeste's face did not change, but something behind her eyes did, a calculation, a reassessment. I turned to my son. You didn't know about this, I said. Not a question, a statement. Desmond looked at me. Then he looked at his wife. For the first time since I had stood up at this table, my son looked at his wife, really looked at her. Not the way a husband looks at the woman he loves, the way a man looks at a stranger who has been living in his house. Celeste, he said. His voice was quiet. What did you— Not now, she said. Her voice was sharp, final. The voice of someone who has been in control for a very long time and is not interested in explanations. But control, I had learned, is not the same thing as ownership. I went back to the letter. There is one more item, I said. I turned to the last page. This one was shorter, 1 paragraph. But it was the paragraph that mattered most. 4th, I read, the last will and testament of Constance Ann Whitfield was fully amended on December 21, 2023, at the offices of Graves Whitmore and Associates, witnessed by 3 parties, and notarized in accordance with California Probate Code. Total estimated assets as of December 20th, 2023, $185 million. I heard someone at the table draw in a breath. One of the guests, a man I had never met and would never see again. $185 million. That is what my husband and I had built together over 47 years of marriage, of work, of careful decisions made at 4 in the morning when no one else was awake to tell us what they would cost. And Celeste had been waiting very patiently, very politely for me to die so she could decide what to do with it. The estate is distributed as follows, I read. The grandchildren Briar and Finn Whitfield receive equal trust funds to be dispersed when they reach age 25, managed independently by First Republic Private Wealth Management with no parental access or oversight. I looked down the table. Briar, my 10-year-old granddaughter, sat halfway down with her napkin pressed to her mouth, old enough to understand that something terrible was happening, but not yet old enough to know what to do about it. Finn, 8 years old and still holding his sister's hand under the table, looked from his father to his mother, and back again, trying to read faces the way children do when the adults stop making sense. The remainder of the estate, after the trusts, I continued, is distributed as follows: 40% to the Walter Whitfield Foundation, established to provide scholarships and vocational training for hospitality students from working-class families. 35% to Sutter Health Sonoma Cancer Center in recognition of the care provided to Walter Whitfield during his final illness. 25% to the Senior Care Center of Monterey County to be named in honor of Walter Whitfield. I paused. My son Desmond Whitfield, I read, receives a conditional inheritance contingent upon meeting 12 behavioral and financial criteria outlined in Exhibit B to be assessed annually by an independent third party. As of December 21, 2023, none of these criteria have been met in the past 5 years. I did not read Exhibit B aloud. I did not need to. The room understood what conditional inheritance contingent upon 12 criteria meant when none of them had been met. It meant effectively nothing. I lowered the letter, looked at Celeste, not at my son, at her. I do not care about destroying you, I said. I care about taking back what I gave in good faith to my son and his family, what I built with my husband over 47 years, and what was used tonight to place 2 slices of dry bread in front of me while 12 other people ate Wagyu beef. The room was silent, not the kind of silence that comes before someone speaks, the kind that comes after. Stanley Caldwell had both hands flat on the table. Lorelei was staring at her daughter with an expression I could not name. The other guests sat frozen forks, abandoned wine glasses untouched, as if moving might somehow make them complicit in what they had just witnessed. The doorbell rang. Not 5 minutes later, not 5 minutes early. Exactly on time, exactly as the last word left my mouth, as if the person standing outside had been listening to every word I read and knew precisely when to press the button. 12 people turned toward the sound. Celeste's knuckles on her wine glass had gone completely white. The legal team had arrived, and unlike everything else tonight, they were invited. Mrs. Harrison, the maid who had been working for my son for 3 years, crossed the dining room to answer the door, and through the archway I could already see the dark suits. 2 of them, maybe 3. Professional. The kind of people who do not show up at dinner parties by accident. The door opened. Helena Graves, 52, and senior partner at the firm that bore her name, stood in the doorway in a charcoal suit with a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. The man beside her, Mr. Simmons from First Republic Private Banking, held a manila folder with the bank's seal visible on the front. Behind them stood Ms. Coleman, the notary public, with her stamp and seal already visible in her hands. 3 professionals, 3 sets of documents. Christmas Eve at 7 in the evening. Helena saw me standing at the foot of the table and nodded once. All business. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said. Her voice carried across the foyer into the dining room where 12 people sat frozen at a table full of cold food. "We have the formal delivery documents as requested. Everything has been in effect since Monday, December 21st. We are only here to complete the service of notice per your instructions." She stepped into the foyer. Mr. Simmons and Ms. Coleman followed. Helena opened her briefcase and removed 3 cream envelopes, each one sealed, each one labeled. She handed the first one to me. "Your confirmation copy." The second she held out toward the dining room. "Formal notice for Desmond Whitfield." The third she gave to Mr. Simmons. "Witness copy for First Republic Private Banking." Celeste appeared in the archway between the dining room and the foyer. Her champagne silk dress caught the light from the chandelier. Her face was pale. "This is Christmas Eve," she said. Her voice was different now, higher, thinner. "You can't just—" Helena looked at her the way a senior partner looks at someone who has just said something legally meaningless. "California law makes no exceptions for holidays regarding the service of notice, ma'am," Helena said. "All parties have been properly notified as of December 21st. This is merely formal delivery to complete the record." She turned back to me. "Is there anything else you need tonight, Mrs. Whitfield?" "No," I said. "Thank you, Helena." She nodded. Mr. Simmons nodded. Ms. Coleman made a note on her clipboard, stamped something, and handed a copy to Ms. Harrison, who took it with shaking hands. Then the 3 of them walked out the front door, got into a black sedan parked in the circular drive, and left. There is a particular kind of silence that happens when lawyers show up at a family dinner on Christmas Eve with briefcases and notarized documents. It is the silence of people realizing that something they thought was private has become irreversibly legal. That words spoken in dining rooms are now words filed in courthouses. That what was family is now public record. I walked back into the dining room. 12 people sat exactly where they had been sitting when the doorbell rang. No one had moved. No one had taken a bite of food. The jazz quartet's instruments sat abandoned in the corner. I was halfway to my seat when Stanley Caldwell stood up. He did not stand quickly. He stood the way a man stands when he has made a decision and wants everyone in the room to see that the decision is final. 30 years on the bench had taught him how to make a gesture mean something. He looked at his daughter. "We knew nothing about the seating arrangement tonight until your mother-in-law stood up," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "None of us knew." Celeste opened her mouth. No sound came out. Stanley turned to me. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "your husband was a man I deeply respected. We served together on the Monterey Regional Arts Council for 8 years. The reversion clause he placed in that deed was the action of a good man who understood exactly what kind of protection his wife might need. I am sorry for tonight. I am sorry my daughter chose to humiliate you in front of witnesses." He turned back to Celeste. "You have embarrassed this family," he said. Then he looked at his wife. "Lorelei, we're leaving." Lorelei stood. She did not look at her daughter. She picked up her purse from the back of her chair, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the foyer. Stanley followed. For a moment no one else moved. Then Celeste's sister stood, then her brother, then their spouses. One by one, like dominoes falling in reverse, the Caldwell family rose from the table, set down their napkins, and walked toward the front door. No one said goodbye. No one looked back. The door opened, closed, opened again, closed again, 4 times, 5, 6. And then the only people left in the dining room were me, my son, my 2 grandchildren, and Celeste. The other guests, the friends, the colleagues, the people whose names I had never learned sat frozen in their chairs, staring at plates of food that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. One of them, a woman in a green dress, stood up carefully. "I think," she said, "I should probably—" She did not finish the sentence. She just walked toward the door. 2 others followed, then 3 more, then the rest. 30 seconds later, the dining room was empty except for family. Celeste stood in the center of the room, surrounded by empty chairs where her parents had been sitting, where her siblings had been sitting, where the people she had invited to witness her perfect Christmas dinner had been sitting. Desmond sat at the head of the table, staring at his Wagyu in a house that was no longer his. His hands were in his lap. He had not looked up since Helena Graves walked through the door. The candles had burned down to stubs in their silver holders. The Christmas tree lights blinked in the front window. Somewhere in the kitchen I could still smell the faint scent of the peach cake I had baked at 4 in the morning, the cake that Celeste had handed to the maid with 2 fingers and told her not to bring out. I walked toward the corner of the table where my 2 grandchildren sat. Briar and Finn, 10 and 8 years old, holding hands under the table, the way children do when the adults have stopped making sense and all they have left is each other. They looked up at me with wide eyes. One of them was about to ask the question that would break their father completely. I walked to the corner of the table where my 2 grandchildren sat, and I saw in their faces something I had not seen all night, the simple expectation that I would tell them the truth. Not a version of the truth, not an explanation designed to make them feel better or make me look kinder, just the truth. I sat down in the empty chair beside them. The plate of dry bread sat 3 seats away, untouched exactly where it had been placed an hour ago. Finn looked up at me. His eyes were wide and serious. 8 years old, still young enough to ask questions without knowing they might hurt. "Grandma," he said, "why do you only have bread?" Behind me, I heard a chair scrape against the floor. Sharp, sudden. Desmond had stood up. I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on Finn. "Because Grandma was served what they thought Grandma deserved to receive," I said. And tonight, Grandma proved that they were wrong. Briar, 10 years old and already learning to read the spaces between words, looked at me with an expression that broke my heart just a little. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "Better than ever," I said. And I meant it. I reached over and took both their hands. Small hands. Still soft. Not yet scarred by the kind of decisions their parents had made tonight. "The cake I brought tonight," I said. "The cake I made starting at 4 in the morning, it's in the kitchen behind the mixer. Tonight before you go to sleep, find it. Eat it on real plates, with real forks. That is what your grandfather loved most. Not the fancy dinners, not the Wagyu beef, just good cake made with care, shared with people who matter." Finn nodded. Briar squeezed my hand. I stood up. "Before I tell you what I said at that table, I need to ask, do you think what I did tonight was justice or cruelty?" Comment A for justice, B for cruelty. And add one short reason. Please note the next part includes some fictionalized details added to deepen the emotional impact and convey the core message. I walked to the head of the table. Not my son's seat anymore, not my daughter-in-law's seat. The table in the house that had my name on the deed again, the house my husband had protected for me 5 years before he died, the house that was mine by law, and by the foresight of a man who had loved me enough to imagine the worst and prepare for it. I did not sit down. I stood there, my purse in my hand, and I spoke in the same calm voice I had used to read the letter. "You have 30 days to settle the debt with the law firm," I said, "or set up a payment plan that Helena Graves will review. You have until March 31st, 2026 to vacate this mansion. I will need to use it to restructure some assets." I looked at the plate of dry bread. Still sitting there. Still untouched. "If tonight you had placed a portion of Wagyu in front of your mother like everyone else," I said, "all of these papers would still be sitting in my purse until after Christmas. We would have eaten dinner, we would have had dessert, we would have opened presents, and then after the holiday, I would have quietly handled everything through lawyers without witnesses." I picked up my purse. "But you chose 2 slices of dry bread," I said. "So you yourselves chose the exact moment to find out the truth." I walked out of the dining room, through the archway, past the living room with its 20-foot Christmas tree and its 1,000 white lights. past the console table in the hallway where a poinsettia sat beside a Christmas card that read, "Merry Christmas from our family" in gold script. My name was not written on that card. I opened the front door. I did not slam it. I closed it gently the way you close a door when you are not angry, just finished. I drove home on Highway 1. The ocean was black to my right, invisible, except for the sound of waves hitting rocks. The road curved through darkness, punctuated by the occasional porch light, the occasional car passing in the opposite direction. I did not cry. I cried enough this past year. I cried when Walter passed away in the hospice room with his hand in mine. I cried when I moved out of the house we had lived in for 28 years, packing boxes alone because my son was too busy with hotel expansions to help. I cried the first night in my new apartment when I woke up at 3 in the morning and reached for someone who was not there. I have no tears left for tonight. I arrived at my apartment in Pacific Grove at 8:15. I hung my coat in the closet. I brewed a cup of tea. I sat by the window with the small Christmas tree I had decorated by myself 3 weeks ago, its warm yellow lights reflecting in the dark glass. The small apartment in Pacific Grove had cost me nothing when I moved in a year ago. Rent paid from the sale of the hotels, a simple lease, month to month, no strings. The mansion in Carmel had cost me a husband's foresight, a son's complicity, and 2 slices of dry bread. Only one of them felt like home. Walter once said, "A home isn't a building. A home is the person who knows who you are." He had known who I was. Even at the end, when the cancer had taken his voice and most of his strength, he had squeezed my hand 3 times whenever I walked into the room. Our code. The thing we had done since we were young and too shy to say "I love you" out loud in front of other people. I sipped my tea, looked out the window at the lights of Pacific Grove, the small houses with their Christmas decorations, the quiet street where nothing dramatic ever happened. My phone began to vibrate. The first message arrived at 8:47 p.m., 3 hours after I had stood at that table, and opened an envelope that had changed 12 lives in the space of 20 minutes. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was from. There are only so many people who call when everything has fallen apart. The first voicemail was my son's voice, and it was broken in a way I had not heard since he was 8 years old and his pet rabbit died. "Mom," he said, "Mom, please." There was a pause, background noise, someone moving through a house, a door closing. "Celeste is in the bathroom. She won't come out. Her parents left. The kids are asking what happened. They're asking why you only had bread. Mom, please call me. I don't know what to do." The message ended. 8:47 p.m. I set the phone down on the small table beside my chair. Picked up my tea. It had gone lukewarm. I drank it anyway. The second message came at 9:31. Celeste's voice, controlled, every word chosen carefully the way a lawyer chooses words when they are building a case. "What you did tonight," she said, "reading legal documents at a family dinner in front of children was deeply inappropriate. My parents are very upset. I am willing to talk about setting some boundaries once you've had time to calm down. I know you've been struggling since Walter died, and I want to extend grace during this difficult time for you." She paused. "Please think about the example you're setting for Briar and Finn," she said. "They need stability right now, not drama." The message ended. I deleted it immediately, not out of anger, out of recognition. Celeste had just listened to her family walk out, watched her husband collapse, sat in a bathroom while her children asked questions she could not answer, and her voicemail was about boundaries and my struggle and the example I was setting. She had not mentioned the dry bread once. The third message came at 10:14, Stanley Caldwell's voice, gravelly, tired. The voice of a man who had spent 30 years on a bench listening to people lie and was now trying very hard to tell the truth. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "Stanley Caldwell, I'm sitting at my kitchen table right now having a very serious talk with my wife about our daughter. None of us knew what Celeste had done with the place settings until you stood up. None of us knew." He paused. I could hear him breathing. "I am embarrassed," he said, "in a way I have not been embarrassed in many years. Your husband Walter was a fine man. I served with him on the Monterey Regional Arts Council for 8 years. The reversion clause he placed in that deed was the act of a fine man who understood what kind of protection you might need. I'm sorry for tonight. I'm very sorry." The message ended. I listened to it twice, not because I didn't understand it the first time, because some apologies need to sit in a folder for a long time before they become anything else. That is not cruelty. That is honesty with a handle. I saved the message. I did not call back. The fourth message came at 11:52. Helena Graves, professional brief. Mrs. Whitfield, all procedures have been finalized. The documents have been filed with the county recorder and the bank. Everything is in order. Merry Christmas. Click. I set the phone down, looked out the window at the lights of Pacific Grove. It was nearly midnight. Christmas Eve was almost over. I made more tea, sat back down in the chair by the small Christmas tree with its warm yellow lights. Thought about nothing in particular, thought about everything. The phone vibrated again at 12:34 a.m. Christmas Day now, technically. The screen said Desmond's number, but when I answered, it was Briar's voice. Grandma. Her voice was small, quiet. The voice of a child calling after everyone else has gone to bed. Briar, I said, are you okay? I ate the cake last night, she said. Finn did too. We found it in the kitchen behind the mixer, like you said. We ate it on the kitchen floor at midnight after Mom went to bed. I closed my eyes. Was it good? I asked. Best thing I ever ate, Grandma, she said. I heard her take a breath. Dad sat with us, she said. He didn't say anything. He just sat down on the floor and ate the cake with us. Then he hugged us both really tight and went to bed. I could not speak. Grandma, Briar said, why was Dad crying while he ate the cake? I opened my eyes, looked at the Christmas tree lights blurring in front of me. Because sometimes, I said slowly, adults need something sweet and real to remember where they lost their way. Briar was quiet for a moment. Are we still going to see you? She asked. Mom said we might not see you anymore because of what happened tonight. I sat up straighter. Briar, I said, listen to me very carefully. You and Finn are welcome at my apartment every Saturday for the rest of my life if you want to come. Through the front door, with your grandfather's recipes, you are always, always welcome. Okay, she whispered. Tell your brother I said so, I said. Okay. And Briar? Yeah. Thank you for calling me, I said. That took courage. Dad's phone was on the counter, she said. I just pressed your name. Still courage, I said. We hung up. I sat for a long time after that. I closed my eyes and saw it my son, 48 years old and CEO of a company I had built, sitting on a kitchen floor at midnight with his 2 children eating cake his mother had made at 4 a.m, crying. Not because he had lost a house, not because he owed money he could not pay, because his daughter had asked a question at a dinner table. Grandma, why do you only have bread? And he had finally heard it. I made more tea, sat by the window until the sky started to lighten over the ocean. Watched the Christmas lights across the street blink off one by one as people woke up and remembered it was morning. I managed to sleep that night, deeper and more peacefully than any night in the year since Walter had died. When I woke up, it was 10:30 on Christmas morning, and the apartment was full of pale winter light. I knew the way you know things and the clarity that only comes after you have finally done what you should have done years ago, that my son would come to see me before the day ended. And I knew what I was going to say to him. What I didn't know yet was whether he would be coming alone or whether Celeste would still be trying to explain. The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock on Christmas afternoon, and I knew before I opened it that my son would be standing there alone. I opened the door halfway. Desmond stood on my doorstep in the same clothes he had worn the night before, unshaven, eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man who had not slept, who had sat up all night in a dark house thinking about things he should have thought about years ago. Sit on the bench in the hallway, I said. Let's keep this short at first. He sat. I closed the door behind him and stood against the wall with my arms folded. Not unkind, just waiting. There was silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that happens when someone is gathering words that matter. Mom, he said, I'm leaving Celeste. I was not surprised, but I let him say it. When did you decide? I asked. Last night, he said. After you left? After the legal team left? After her parents left? She came home from sitting in the bathroom for 2 hours, and she sat in the living room and explained to me for 40 minutes how she was the victim of your overreaction. He looked at his hands. I listened, he said. I've been listening to her construct that kind of sentence for 15 years, but last night I realized something. She was being careful, the way someone is careful when they are managing another person, and the someone she had been managing was me. He paused. Late last night, he said, I caught her on the phone. I don't know who she was talking to, but I heard her say it. The older and weaker she gets, that will be the real time. He looked up at me. She's been thinking that way for a long time, Mom, he said. And I let her. I let her think that way without saying a single thing. I did not move. Do you know, I said quietly, how long I have been waiting for you to say something like that? I know, he said. There is a particular kind of silence that happens between a mother and son when the son has finally understood what he should have understood years ago. It is not comfortable, but it is necessary. I sat down beside him on the bench. "I can pay the debt," he said. "3.24 million. I can sell shares in the company. It will take me 60 days, maybe less. I'll set up the payment plan with your lawyer." "No," I said. He looked at me. "I forgive the debt," I said. "You keep that money to raise my 2 grandchildren. They are going to need it. Divorce is expensive, and good lawyers cost more than bad ones." He stared at me, confused. "But," I said, and I made sure he was looking at me when I said it, "I cannot forgive this. You sat at that table in the house of your parents, eating a 5 Wagyu, while your mother stood before 2 slices of dry bread, and you did not stand up." I let that sit. "Not once," I said. "Not when she took my cake with 2 fingers like a wet umbrella. Not when she told the maid not to bring it out. Not when she placed that bread in front of me and announced to 12 people that older people eating less is better for their health. You sat at the head of that table and cut your Wagyu into tiny pieces, and you did not stand up." His face crumpled. "I say this," I continued, "not to hurt you more than you are already hurt, but so you remember. Your silence weighed heavier than anything she did. Because she is a stranger, I have learned to understand over 15 years. But you are my flesh and blood. You are my son. And you chose not to see what was happening until it was placed on a plate in front of 12 witnesses." Desmond put his face in his hands and cried. Not quiet crying. The kind of crying that comes from a place deep inside where shame and grief live together. I sat beside him in the silence I had learned to use over 15 years, but this time it was not the silence of a woman swallowing words to keep peace. It was the silence of a mother letting her son feel the full weight of what he had done, because that weight was the only thing that would teach him not to do it again. He cried for a long time. I did not touch him. I did not tell him it was okay, because it was not okay, and we both needed to know that. When he finally stopped, he wiped his face with his sleeve and sat there staring at the floor. "The kids are coming with me," he said. His voice was rough. "Celeste is going to stay with her parents for now. Stanley called this morning. He told me to bring them to him before I did anything else. He said—" Desmond paused. "He said he wanted to apologize to them for what their mother did." I nodded. "Can we come here?" he asked. "On Christmas the kids want to see you. I told them we could come if you said yes." I looked at him. My son, 48 years old, CEO of a company I had built, unshaven and broken and finally awake. "Yes," I said. "I will let you come through the front door. With cobbler if you want to bring some, though. I'll bring my own as a precaution." He laughed. It was a small sound broken at the edges, but it was real. "I deserved that," he said. "You did," I said. He stood up. I walked him to the door. He paused before he left. "Thank you, Mom," he said. "For the debt, for everything." "Don't thank me," I said. "Thank your father. He's the one who saw this coming 5 years ago and built the door for me to walk through." Desmond nodded. He stepped outside into the December afternoon light. I closed the door. I stood in my hallway alone, and I remembered what Helena Graves had told me on the phone that morning when I answered at 10:15, still half asleep. She had one more envelope. An envelope I didn't know existed. An envelope Walter had left behind with different instructions than all the others. "It was green," she said, "not cream, with my name written on it in Walter's handwriting. She would deliver it at 6 o'clock that evening." I looked at the clock on the wall, 5:15, 45 minutes. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock, exactly 1 hour after my son had left, and I knew before I opened it that this would be the last delivery of the night. Helena Graves stood on my doorstep. No briefcase this time, no dark suit, just a woman in jeans and a sweater holding a small green envelope. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said, "this is what your husband left behind. He instructed me only deliver it when you have used that other envelope." She handed it to me. "Merry Christmas," she said quietly, and then she left. I closed the door and stood in the hallway holding the envelope. Green, not cream. My name written across the front in Walter's handwriting, careful slanted slightly to the right, the way he had written my name on birthday cards and anniversary notes for 47 years. I walked to the reading chair in the corner of my living room. The chair I had brought from the mansion after he died, because it was the chair he sat in every evening while I cooked dinner reading the newspaper or just watching me move through the kitchen. I sat down, opened the envelope. The letter inside was 1 page, handwritten, dated November 2018. My love. If one day you open this envelope, it means they have forgotten that you were once the mistress of the house. I cannot be there to protect you anymore, so I have let the law do it for me. I began preparing these papers in 2017, the year we sold the hotels. I saw the way Celeste looked at you when you spoke about the sale price. I saw the way she asked questions about estate planning over Thanksgiving dinner while you were in the kitchen. I knew. I know Desmond. I love our son. And precisely because I love him, I know that love is not enough to protect a man from his own weakness. I can only protect you. Live well, my dear. Bake many more cakes. Remember that our true home isn't any building on a deed. It is the place the two of us built over 47 years, a place no one can take away. I love you, forever. I folded the letter carefully, set it on my lap, sat very still. I did not cry. For the first time in a year, I smiled. I sat in that chair until the room went dark, until the only light was the glow from the Christmas tree in the corner and the distant street lamps outside the window. Then I stood up, walked to the kitchen, turned on the oven. I made the second cake in 2 days, not because I needed to, because Walter had told me to bake many more cakes, and I was not in the habit of ignoring him even now. While I worked the dough, I thought about the last 48 hours. The dry bread, the cream envelope, the doorbell at 7 in the evening, Stanley standing up, Finn's question, Desmond crying on a kitchen floor at midnight, the green letter. For 8 years, Walter sat beside me every evening. We drank tea. We talked about small things, the weather, the garden, what we would have for dinner. And in his mind, the entire time, he was building a door that only I could open. That is what love looks like when it knows it will not live forever. The cake finished baking at 8:15. I let it cool for 10 minutes, then cut a slice and ate it standing by the window. The best in California, I said aloud. I laughed because it sounded funny. Then I said louder to the empty apartment and to Walter, wherever he was now. You were right. I've been doing better than your mother for a long time. I washed the dishes, dried them, put them away. Then I took out the small notebook I had been keeping since the day Walter died. 1 line a day. 365 days of observations about a world without him in it. I sat at the kitchen table, opened to today's page, wrote, They placed 2 slices of dry bread before me at the Christmas dinner table of the very house I built. So I served them back my husband's final gift on cream paper with a notary seal right in front of their own family, and I brought my cake back home. I looked at the words for a long time. Then I added one more line. Walter, you were there. You have always been there. I closed the notebook, set the pen down, made another cup of tea. Then I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Christmas night in Pacific Grove. Lights on every house, multicolored strands blinking in patterns red, green, white, blue. Quiet, beautiful. The small apartment in Pacific Grove had cost me nothing when I moved in a year ago. The mansion in Carmel had cost me a husband's foresight, a son's awakening, and 2 slices of dry bread. Only one of them would ever be home. I stood there sipping my tea, and I thought about next year. Next year, I will host Christmas here in this apartment. The 2 grandchildren. My son, if he is ready. There will be no bartender. There will be no jazz band. There will be no 20-foot tree with 1,000 white lights. There will only be cake and tea and a small tree in the corner that I can decorate by myself without needing a ladder. And everyone will have a real plate, real utensils, and a seat with their name on it, including mine. I sat by that window until the multicolored lights across the city began to blink out one by one. Families going to bed, children falling asleep with new toys in their arms, adults cleaning kitchens and putting away leftovers and turning off the oven. Christmas was ending. The hardest Christmas of my life was ending. And when I finally went to bed that night at 11:30, after brushing my teeth and changing into the flannel pajamas Walter used to say made me look like a librarian, I slept. Deeply. Peacefully. The way a woman sleeps when she has spent 47 years with a man who loved her enough to build a door she would never have to use unless she did. And when she used it, she found that he had been standing on the other side the entire time holding it open, waiting for her to walk through into the place he had built for her all along. Home. I woke up on the morning of December 26th to California sun filling my apartment with warm gold light, the kind of light that makes everything look clean and possible, the kind Walter used to say made him grateful to be alive. My phone buzzed at exactly 8 o'clock. A video call. I picked it up and saw 2 small faces on the screen, both of them still in pajamas, both of them calling from what looked like their father's bedroom. Finn spoke first. "Grandma!" He said, his voice eager and a little too loud the way 8-year-olds are in the morning. "Is there any cake left?" I smiled. "There is," I said. "But it's at my house now, not your house, and I think by the time you come visit it will all be gone." His face fell. Briar, sitting beside him, with her hair tangled from sleep, looked at me with her grandmother's eyes, my eyes, and said nothing, just waited. "But," I said, "if you want to learn how to make it yourselves, I can teach you. Come early Saturday morning. Grandma will teach you from the very beginning, your grandfather's recipe, the one he learned from his mother and the one I learned from him." Finn's face lit up. "Can we?" he asked, looking off screen at someone I couldn't see, probably Desmond. "Dad, can we?" I heard my son's voice in the background, tired but steady. "Yes, we'll be there." Briar leaned closer to the screen. "We'd like that, Grandma," she said softly. "Good," I said. "Then Saturday it is. Bring aprons if you have them. If not, I have extras." Finn was already bouncing. Briar smiled a small, real smile that reminded me so much of Walter I had to look away for a second. "We'll see you then," I said. They waved, I waved back. The screen went dark. I set the phone down on the counter and stood there in the silence. The apartment was full of morning light now. It came through the window over the sink across the small kitchen table, where I ate breakfast alone most days, onto the counter where I had rolled out dough just 12 hours ago. This was the same light that had filled the mansion in Carmel on Christmas mornings when Desmond was young. The same light that had come through the windows of the house Walter and I lived in for 28 years. California winter light. Pale and clean and full of possibility. But this time it was filling a space that was mine. Not ours, not theirs, mine. I thought about what Walter had written in his letter. About doors, about protection, about knowing that the people we love sometimes cannot protect us from themselves. He knew Desmond, he loved Desmond, and he knew that love would not be enough. So he built a door. Not a door to escape out of, a door to step back into myself. For 15 years, I had been shrinking, making myself smaller so that Celeste would not feel threatened, listening so that Desmond would not feel torn, smiling so that the grandchildren would not sense tension, accepting less so that everyone else could have more. 2 slices of dry bread. That was what it took for me to finally use the door Walter had built. And when I stepped through it, I did not find an escape. I found myself. The version of myself I had been before I learned to make room for people who only wanted to take. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept the aprons. 3 of them. One was mine, plain white, stained with years of use. One was Walter's blue with a pocket on the front where he used to keep a pen for writing down recipe adjustments. And one was small child-sized that I had bought years ago for Briar when she was 5 and had asked if she could help me bake cookies. I had never used it. Celeste had said it would make too much mess. I pulled it out now, held it up to the light. It still had the tags on it. I thought about Saturday, about Finn asking 100 questions while he cracked eggs, about Briar measuring flour with the careful precision she had inherited from her grandfather, about teaching them to fold the peaches into the batter gently so they would not break, about passing down something that mattered, not money, not property, not a mansion or a hotel chain or a trust fund that would not unlock until they were 25. Just a recipe, and the memory of a man who had loved them before they were born, and the knowledge that their grandmother had chosen dignity over silence, had chosen truth over peace, had chosen herself when it would have been easier to keep shrinking. I folded the small apron and set it on the counter. Then I picked up Walter's apron, held it for a moment. It still smelled faintly like him, or maybe I just imagined it did. Soap and newspaper ink and the coffee he drank every morning while reading at the kitchen table. I remembered the first time he taught me to bake. 60 years ago. I was 15. He was 17. We were not married yet. We were barely dating. But he had invited me to his mother's house and handed me a wooden spoon and said, "You have to stir it exactly 72 times. Not 71, not 73. My mother counts." I had laughed. He had been serious. And I had fallen in love with him right there, standing in a kitchen that was not mine, learning to make something with my hands that would matter to someone else. I hung his apron back in the drawer, gently. Then I looked out the window at the view of Pacific Grove. Small houses, quiet streets. The ocean visible in the distance, a thin line of blue at the edge of the world. Saturday is 4 days away, I thought. I need to buy peaches. And to you listening to my story, remember this. Sometimes the quietest response carries the most power. For 15 years, I mistook silence for kindness. I thought if I made myself smaller, if I listened more and spoke less, if I accepted dry bread while others ate Wagyu, I was keeping the peace. Don't make my mistake. Silence in the face of cruelty isn't peace, it's permission. And the people who love you should never ask you to disappear to make room for their comfort. What I learned from these revenge stories with Mom is that dignity isn't something you can take from someone who knows their worth. Walter built a door for me years before I needed it, because real love prepares. Family drama doesn't have to define you, but how you respond to it will. I believe God's timing is always perfect. That envelope needed to be opened at exactly that moment, not before, not after. When you finally stand up, make sure you're standing on solid ground. If you've stayed with me this far, I'd love to know, what would you have done in my place? Leave a comment and tell me. And if you know someone facing their own family drama, share this with them. They might need to hear it. Subscribe to Silent Revenge with Auntie May for more revenge stories with Mom who chose dignity over silence. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story contains fictionalized elements for reflection, and learning what matters is the message it carries.